All right, all right. Welcome everyone to Fook Live Episode 1. Great branding. There's a science to it. My name is Matt, and I'll be your host for today. And just want to say happy holidays to everyone out there. It's been a rough year, but looking forward to some good times. So the first 30 minutes of this is going to be a conversation about brand and branding with Fook. And then we're going to get to a Q&A portion where we're gonna dive deeper into some of your questions. So if you see a question box on the right-hand side of your screen, please feel free to send us a question, say hello, whatever you want. We'll be monitoring that. So let's quickly introduce the faces of Fook. So we have Tia Koo, the designer. Hey, Tia.
Hey, Matthew. It's great to be here.
Welcome, welcome. Then we have Michael Wood, the photographer and videographer.
Hello.
How's it going? And we got Alex Wilson, the writer.
Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning. So let's go into a deeper dive of who Fook is. So we have Tia Koo, lead designer at Fook. Tia is a graduate of OCAD University in Toronto and the Basel School of Design in Switzerland. He started Fook following his time at the prestigious studio of Entro and Gottschalk and Ash, one of the world's most preeminent studios. Next, we have Michael Wood, the lead photographer and videographer on the team. Michael is also an OCAD alumni and freelanced and worked at Cineva Films before co-founding Fook, bringing 8+ years of experience in both photography and video production. And then we have Alex Wilson, Fook's copywriter and marketing strategist. Alex studied a bachelor's and master's degree in law at the University of Bristol in the UK, before opting for a career in marketing with Samsung's European marketing team. He left Samsung to launch a social media startup before then moving to Canada and joining Fook. And last, we have Matt Rovette, that's me, your host for today, and a video producer with Fook. I have been in video production for over 10 years and am recently a certified Canadian drone pilot. I spent 4 years in corporate marketing for video before joining the Fook team. So today we're going to be talking about branding and brand. What is it? How it's done well. And we'll talk about Fook's approach to branding in general before talking about how design, writing, and imagery combine to bring a brand to life. So I'm going to ask the tough questions. Here we go. You ready? Alex, what does Fook do?
It is a tough one to start. So there's a long and a short answer, I guess. The short answer being that we do branding and marketing, and the branding component of that being creating visual identities for organizations and companies. So that's logos, typography, color palettes, and then bringing that to life through marketing. So that includes print marketing, so billboards, posters, leaflets, flyers, whatever, website development, digital advertising like social media advertising and Google Ads. And then videography, photography, and marketing strategy. But I guess from a deeper perspective, what we do is we really aim to make work that genuinely stands out. Marketing is a very noisy landscape, and a lot of brands just play into that noise, and a lot of brands are shouting for your attention. And we want to create work that engages people and earns your attention. It doesn't try and rip it from you, but it earns your attention and elevates the perception of the company. Really, we believe that marketing is something that an audience should engage with, not be subjected to. It shouldn't be a shouting match between brands, but something that people want to look at, or they want to read, or they want to engage with. It should be a positive experience for them. Marketing should seek to build some kind of rapport or relationship with an audience. And it really comes down to the integrity of your communication. Do you want to scream at people, or do you want to have a conversation? We think the conversation's the better way to go. There's a saying that integrity is longevity, and that's something that I think we really, that's one of our values, is that if you communicate and you put care and consideration into your communications, and you invest in those relationships with customers, you'll grow in the long term, and you have deeper and longer term relationships with clients and customers, for sure.
I love it. So what is a brand to you?
I guess we should make a distinction between a brand and branding. So a brand is really just how people perceive you. It's not just in a marketing sense, but in a total sense. It's what people think of you. It's how people see your organization. It's what they feel when they interact with you. That's your brand. It encompasses every experience that someone has with your company. Branding is the visual representation of that brand and that company. And the important thing is whether you focus on branding or not, you do have a brand. It's, you know, even if you haven't invested a cent in creating a brand identity or in marketing, you have a brand. People still perceive you a certain way. You're just not showing them how to perceive you. And investing in branding means you get to define that perception and the experience that you convey to customers. You get to tell that story instead of other people telling that story for you. And good branding visualizes the whole brand experience. It takes everything that a company holds true and communicates it to the world. And that's what the best brands, you know, are so good at. They apply that experience to everything, and they live that experience from their marketing to staff training to customer support, events, retail, the working culture. They really live that full brand experience, and their brand identity is just a visual manifestation of that. And yeah, that's what the best brands are great at doing, is telling their story. And that's what branding really is telling a story and telling it well and telling it consistently.
So we're talking about storytelling, visual representation, and how that ties in with imagery, writing, design, social media, and so on. How do you make all of that happen?
I think it's kind of the result of a good process. Good branding is the result of a good process. When we have a branding project, you know, come towards us, you know, there's a new client and they want to rebrand, or they want to, you know, start a brand from scratch. If maybe they're a startup. The first thing we got to do is we got to listen to what they really want. You know, like everyone kind of has a different definition of branding, you know, when they say it. So, you know, first thing we got to do, again, we got to get aligned with them, and we got to unpack, you know, what they mean. And we got to ask them a lot of questions. You know, we got to probably do a brand compass to really understand what their goals and their values are. And so we do that first off, and then we'll go into kind of the next step, which is probably do our research. You know, do some market research, you know, start creating mood boards, start, you know, pulling visual examples of what's kind of out there in the world that kind of has the same direction we want to go in, and kind of, you know, visualize what we spoke about when we were listening. And then, you know, from there, you know, we'll start to conceptualize and, you know, mock up, wireframe, you know, really kind of present back to the client or who we're dealing with where we want to go with this project, you know, how we want to brand them based on what we've heard from them. And then from there, you know, we will deliver them back you know, a brand manual.
Love it.
And
Love it.
the brand manual, it sums up the details and story of your brand. It acts as a document, a guide to help you employ, you know, the different components of your brand, the language, the design direction, the imagery. It's that holistic summary of all of that, you know, and logos, implementation, typography treatment, how to use color, what to avoid, you know, how do you know when you're not implementing it properly, and all of your communications, whether that's your website, your social media posts, posters you want to make, anything that is a representation of your business from big to small, is all built out of the brand manual. It's the foundation to everything. And you know, this allows your business to be easier to be remembered. It gives you that straightforward path to building relationships with your audience, and then that gives you trust with them. And if you have trust, you have a return customer, you have a long-term relationship with that individual, and you will see the return when you do it right. Yeah,
so it sounds like it's a Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a good way to put it.
So you know, all those steps are great. I really think the research, everything, the listening, the mock-ups, it's so important to start there. What value does quality branding bring?
I think when you're thinking about value when it comes to branding, and maybe you're trying to understand how much you need to invest in to branding, I think an easy way to kind of boil that down is to, you know, it's kind of like influence. When you're doing your brand well, and then, you know, you're having more influence on potential customers on their decisions. And so, you know, the more you invest, the more you want to see that influence coming to light. You want to be influencing people's decisions on, coming back to you to use your product or service again. Or, if they're looking at, what's out there in the landscape, you want to be able to use your brand, if you're doing it well, to kind of really influence that decision, so that there's this kind of gut feeling when someone's kind of interacting with you or, considering you, that, they have this feeling that they want to go with you, they want to buy your stuff, they want to use your service. So I think when you're really doing it well, you have a really strong influence kind of on customer decisions.
I think as well, like just building on that influence idea, like it really, branding elevates the image, it elevates the perception of a company. Like careful, considered branding, consistent branding as well. That's key. It adds credibility and legitimacy and trustworthiness to a business, because you're always talking the same way, and so people feel like they recognize you and they feel like they know you, and they build a relationship. And it makes you memorable if you speak the same way and you're saying the messages that you're saying are communicated consistently. It makes it so much easier for you to be remembered. And the relationship point is a really big one, because there's a lot to a relationship. It allows your customers to really form a genuine relationship with you. As I say, it makes them feel like they know you if you speak the same way and you're saying the same things. It creates this single unified persona that a business has. And that's how people then start to feel like they know you. That's why people love companies like Apple so much, because they talk the same, they feel the same, and people start to love that brand like they love a person pretty much. And yeah, that makes it easy to remember you. It also makes it way easier to trust you. Just as with people, if there's a brand that you build a relationship with, you start to trust them. And when you trust something or someone, you start to listen to them more. So, as an example, if you were walking down the street and a random guy shouts out, "Hey, I've got great shoes, everyone should buy a pair," you're not going to listen to that. You're probably not even going to look at the shoes they have. You're going to walk past. It's just a guy screaming about shoes. But if your friend says to you, "Hey, I just bought some new shoes, they're really great for running," you're going to say, "Okay, what type of shoe it is?" You're going to do some research. You're going to look it up. And that's because you have a relationship with that person. It's the same thing with branding. A brand can be that friend recommending a product versus a random person screaming about it.
Yeah, and it goes beyond identity. It's really about personality and relationship building, and that's what's so super key to is building those relationships, maintaining that same personality, that same voice, trusting, right? 100%. So before we mentioned that branding and brand is brought to life in marketing through combining design, writing, and imagery. So they all need to be pulling in the same direction. So let's start. Let's dig into that a little bit more. Let's start with design. So Tia, what does good design look like?
It's a tough question, because I think this is often the most elusive. How do you know, as a business owner or just anybody, how do you know when your design is working for you? It often goes beyond what it just looks like. It's about how it works. Good design takes complex ideas and expresses it simply. It helps make your product more understandable, the information you communicate easier to digest. It takes your ideas and builds it into a long-lasting culture. And ultimately, it should be the tool in which you use to express your story and your brand, your identity. And all of that, it builds trust, faith, and understanding. It builds trust with your audience that the messaging that you're putting out there is true. The faith with them that it's going to benefit them. That actually what you're saying to them is for them. It's to make their lives better. And understanding that ultimately the reason that your business exists or whatever it is that you're working with is ultimately for them. And all of that process, comes from researching, listening, and indulging in the culture that you're designing for, that you're communicating on behalf of. You have to take the truth of an experience of a certain group of people or an individual and express it simply. If you are a restaurant, you know, why do chefs love food? Why do people love food? Go and try to cook it yourself. You know, you have to understand why they love what they do. And that often involves learning to love it yourself. So if we look at, you know, this example here for a brand we did for Amanda, which is a health coaching company that helps women tackle their body image and health in their life. And we essentially took the sentiment that all body types are accepted and celebrated, and expressed it in a very approachable way, using, you know, a gradation of letter weights as a way to talk about that idea, you know, of that diversity of where everyone falls on that body spectrum and what they believe in. So Matthew, if you want to go to the next slide for me.
Yeah.
So here, you know, we continue to distill that idea. We developed a series of gradients to help speak to that transformation, to speak to the idea that more often than not, when we are tackling the idea of what we look like, our body image, it was a mental story. It was something that was often more of happening in your mind rather than happening in your body. And that was the truth of Amanda's clientele. That was the truth of Amanda and what she believed in her story. And we took that idea and expressed it visually. And again, Matthew, if you want to go to the next slide, you know, we can see how these sort of core elements are able to be expressed across the multitude of different assets, whether that's something as simple as an envelope or a tote bag, or something as, you know, front facing as a store sign. And again, using the brand manual to help us determine what all of these assets look like in order to kind of maintain that consistency and identity.
And I really love this, how design is really working with the copy. It's really working with the writing. It complements it. And my next question is for Alex. How important is writing and language, and what's the process?
Well, surprise, surprise, Matthew. I think writing is very important. You know, it really is. It's how your brand is heard. It's the language that a company uses determines the action someone takes. It determines how they perceive you. It determines the tone that they think you're saying something in. You know, the words really are how you're perceived. And I think good writing hits a few marks for me. I think firstly, it communicates ideas succinctly. It engages minds. It makes people go, "Oh, I get it," instantly. It makes people respond in a way by focusing on a message and not adding decoration. And a lot of brands get lost at this stage. They try and say too much about themselves. It's like they're too excited to tell the world about everything they do. So they try and hit all of their USPs and say, like, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is how good we are. And they can't avoid that temptation to squeeze everything in. And it really isn't useful. It weighs a message down. It makes it harder for someone to have that, "Oh, I get it" moment. And the likelihood is you'll probably be ignored if you say too much. People will just like gloss over something because you're not, you know, engaging their mind.
You're not hooking them either. You're really not getting them to go deeper and to want to know more.
Yeah. And I think that's then a sign of good writing, knowing its context. So for example, if you write on a billboard, it's very different to writing on a website. In general, writing needs to make the most of very fleeting moments of someone's attention. Every word has to be deliberate. Don't decorate the message with unnecessary words, because you only have that small moment of someone's attention before they'll give up on you. So you need to make the most of that, and you need to be aware of how much time you have someone's attention for, so that you can get people to absorb information and act a certain way. And so that's why context is so important. So if you're on a billboard, for example, you have a real fraction of a second of someone's attention. So you can't say everything possible about a company, nowhere near it. If you say too much, people will ignore it because they just don't have the time to engage. So you need to distill that company message into a single takeaway that resonates. On a website, completely different story. Then you've got a little bit more time. And so the role of copy is to pull you into the next line, is to make sure that you go to the next bit and the next bit and the next bit. So it's really about knowing how much time you have someone's attention for, and making sure that you engage someone on that basis. But I think a really big point as well is that good writing talks like a human does. And again, a lot of brands forget about this. They try and talk in technical language, particularly in the B2B space. You get a lot of technical language. I don't know if they're trying to sound impressive, or trying to sound like they're clever and that you can trust them because they're smart. But it really there's no need, just talk like people do. That's how ideas land. When we share ideas, we talk like humans, and that's how ideas land with people. It makes you relatable and understandable as a company if you talk like a person does. It sounds very obvious, but it really, a lot of brands miss this. And if you talk like people do, it makes you more trustworthy, more authentic. And yeah, it just if you try and sound too technical or convoluted, you get in the way of what you're trying to say, and you miss that engagement. And just a final point on, I think, what good writing looks like. It also talks up to an audience. I think it's the same with design. It's the same with photography, branding in general. We always talk up to an audience. You never speak down to them. Don't patronize anybody. We can be aspirational. I think that's a big part of it. But in terms of I was going to say, you're way ahead of me there, man. Nice. In terms of the process behind that, I think the first step is understand the company, understand their industry. What's the difference between this company and the rest of their competition? What's their USP? Unique selling point, by the way. I keep using silly acronyms. Why do they exist? What do they believe? Why do their customers love them? Without this context, without this understanding, you can't write confidently, and you can't carry authority in the way that you're writing, and you can't be authentic either.
Right.
And so that's the other part, is understanding the brand image that you're trying to convey. Whether whether we're defining that brand image as Fook, or if we're working with someone who already has a brand image defined, you need to understand what brand image you're trying to achieve or maintain. So do they want to be lighthearted? Do they want to be serious, professional, authoritative, direct, playful, confident? We really have to understand the tone that we're trying to hit. And part of that is knowing demographics. You have to know who you're speaking to, the language that resonates, the things they want to hear. And I think Buddy is a really good example on the slide here of a brand that knows the image it's chasing. So this was a cannabis business that we named and branded. And this is purely brand messaging. This isn't selling points. This isn't any service message. This is purely brand. And it's all about trying to nail the Buddy brand experience. And the idea behind Buddy was that it would be a very straightforward customer experience. It would be literally your weed chaperone, like your weed buddy that helps you non-judgmentally make cannabis purchase decisions. And so that humanity and that personality was, or being super personable was absolutely central to the brand experience. And so we just had fun with that, and we made that human touch absolutely central to the brand voice in these brand awareness pieces. And so that the goal really was this friendly, approachable language, these kinds of references that we'd understand. I think it's also a great example, Tia, of design and writing working together. Yep. It's, we spoke at the top about, how branding comes to life, and it's really about a constant dialogue. And I think this is a great example where not only does the copy elevate the design, but the design elevates the copy as well. So yeah, without understanding the brand image, without understanding the background, you won't have that authenticity. You'll sound superficial when people pick up on that. And then, once you have your understanding, you can create your mission statements, your value propositions, and these live in the brand manual, and they're the foundations for everything, every piece of messaging that you create. So the value proposition and the mission statements, they tell you what your key messages are, basically. So you can always keep focused around, what are the priorities here? What does this company believe in? It's not meant to be any kind of sexy marketing language, a mission statement. It's meant to just really focus and concisely say, what does a business do? What do we believe, and what's important to us? So you can start creating those. And once you have those in place, once that foundation's there, then you start creating messaging. So you're keeping in mind the main message, the brand voice, the industry, all of that context, and building it from value propositions and mission statements. So this was one that we did with George C, a fashion retailer in Toronto. And it really just, it lets you know, okay, when we're creating these messages, what are the things that are important to this brand? And it keeps you very focused, and it keeps you consistent. And just a final, sorry, if you could go to the Flex Day slide there. Yeah, and so then we're creating messaging now. We've got these value propositions, and Flex Day, they're a co-working space in Toronto, and their real driving point was the accessibility and the affordability of a co-working space compared to pretty expensive other pretty expensive co-working solutions. And so our goal here was to really distill. They have a lot of USPs, a lot of points about their service, but our goal was really to distill their business into one of their USPs and deliver it in a very engaging way. And so we use this kind of a song lyric that most people probably understand, and communicated very succinctly and focused on one USP that people would relate to and engage with. And once we understood, we had the mission statement, the value proposition, we knew what we could build messaging from. We knew the voice that we needed to deliver it in. And so it gave this really, it draws you in and it makes you want to read the next bit. And that's the main thing with copy.
It really, and that's the thing, that this is very visual too, right? It's intentional. You have your first line of copy very big, and then you have that space, and that was intentionally put there, and I think it works. So we have design, we have writing, and I want to ask Michael, what is good imagery? What's the process in achieving good imagery?
What a great question, Matt. Good imagery. How do you boil that down? I think good imagery, in a simple form, gets a reaction out of you. Right. We're flooded with images, especially online these days. Everybody wants your attention. Everybody wants you to look at them. And I think, the good imageries get your attention, or the good images get your attention. And, I think good images can get a reaction out of you, with whether it's simple, it makes you think a little bit, in more complicated forms or in bigger forms, good images, can communicate entire concepts to you. Good videos, can tell you, really complicated stories and really kind of get you invested in them.
In a more simple way too, right? Like you don't need, like with video, you don't need the highest quality necessarily. It's a little bit more forgiving on video because you're really focusing on more of a story. You have more time for it. So photos are really different in that way.
Absolutely. They are different, but I think there is still kind of there's that overlap with that, how are we communicating, or what are we trying to communicate? And so when it comes down to the process of, how do we communicate with someone, I think, just like we said at the top, it starts with listening. At this point in the kind of the branding process, if we're onto marketing materials like this, hopefully there's a brand manual that your client's handing you, so you can really understand the brand and what the style is, and what the voice needs to be, or what the look needs to be, the feel. So you start with listening. You start with understanding what your goal is. I think that's very, very important. You want to know where these images are going to end up, whether it's on, Instagram or the website, or, the dream is a billboard in Times Square where everyone, around the world is seeing your images. But you want to know that end goal, because, you just build towards that. So, you listen, then you go and you plan. You really try to break down what you need to do. You plan your shoot, you plan what you need, whether it's photo or video, who needs to be involved. So by the time you're shooting, when you're doing your production, when you're doing your post-production, you're ready for this piece of content to, really own its place on Instagram or again on the website or wherever. You really want it to own it, because I think that's when you've done enough work that when you're asking for someone's time on the other end, they're going to want to give it to you, because they can kind of feel that you tried to offer them something with something, high quality, that's authentic, that's trying to offer them something valuable. Then they'll give you their time. So I think that's kind of a good process in trying to create a good image.
And we're talking about strategy. This is all intentionally done. Nothing is without purpose. And
Exactly.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that they all combine into this beautiful work of art. And there you go, the science of it, right? So my key takeaways from what we've learned today is marketing is something that an audience should engage with and not be subjected to. We have good design listens, and we want to define how the world perceives you. Alex, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I think so. So, really, that's really what branding and marketing comes down to. It's it's defining how the world perceives you. And the science then, it really comes down to process, as we've said like 6 times during this during this this little webinar here. So yeah, it's listening, it's learning and creating. Once you really understand an organization, once you've got that foundation, once you really know the context that you're designing to, that you're writing to, then you create that identity. You tell the story of that company and their values in that in that brand identity, and it's an authentic representation of that company. And once you understand that, once you have that brand manual, that foundation, it's a constant dialogue between design, writing, imagery, to create really holistic marketing pieces with depth and that all pull in the same direction, all pull towards the same goal, and really bring that brand and that brand identity to life.
I love it. I love it. So that's our 30 minutes of conversation. So for those of you who have to, get going, we really want to wish you a happy holidays. And if you want to reach out to us, that's great. Please reach out to us, create@fookcommunications.com, and follow us on Instagram @fookcom. You can even add us on LinkedIn. So take our names down, add us to LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you. So let's actually go into a few questions that we have, and I'm just going to look for those some of the questions that were sent in advance. Harry has a question here. Has C19 led to so much online noise that we've reached a Rubicon that prevents good content getting the engagement it merits?
Couldn't even have 30 minutes, a 30-minute break from COVID there, could we? Just we
First
got there.
question. So COVID.
I think it's a good point. I think I think Tia and Mike will agree with me that if work deserves attention, it gets attention. If it deserves recognition, it gets recognition. I think what happens with things like COVID-19, and not to make this sound like it's not serious at all, but it becomes a marketing trend. And the reason people get drowned out isn't because it's great work that deserves attention. It's usually because everyone starts talking the same language. Everyone starts talking about the same thing. Same with any trend. Again, sorry to call it a trend, but anything that comes along like this, any marketing trends, people, companies love to just, they realize that someone else is winning by talking about it. So everybody talks about it. And so you see these brands just shoehorning in relevance into COVID-19. And that's how you then get lost in the noise, is when you start talking the same as everybody else. If you're talking your own language, you'll cut through. The work that deserves recognition and engagement will still get it.
Unprecedented times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, is it really unprecedented if we've been living it for 9 months now? Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'll ask that to the audience.
That's a whole nother webinar, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Tell us what you think. If it's really unprecedented, send that in the chat box, please. We have a question from Caitlin. How does Fook approach branding a person compared to branding a company? What are the key elements you consider for both? Tia.
I think if you do it well, it shouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, your goal, our goal, is to build relationships with other people. So if you're an individual, if you're a small business, a huge corporation, your idea is to build a human relationship. It's exactly what Alex brought up. It's exactly what Michael brought up, and everything else. And it's just about paying attention to what the pros and cons are. If you are branding an individual, or you're an individual working on your own brand, use your own self as an advantage. You have a face, you have a literal spokesperson to your brand. Use that to the advantage. If you are, a small business, a company where you might not have a specific individual, you use that flexibility to shape and mold, who you are. I think one of the things is that we want to be always authentic. And that sometimes can work against us, if you're trying to be authentic, and if you're not, it can quite backfire on you. So again, branding a person, branding a company, if you do it well, you'll always come across as human, and that's what we want to see.
I think just to kind of add something to that, I think if you're branding a person versus a business or company or organization, I think you just have to really really make sure you get the authenticity piece right, like the sincerity. Like you have to make sure that you communicate exactly like that person sounds, because there's people that actually know that person. And, I think that you can see it sometimes on Instagram or social media when there's someone that's clearly running someone like a sports star's profile on their behalf. And it sounds a little bit just like distant, it's like there's something not quite, and you can tell it's not that person talking to you. So
Yeah.
I think that's definitely a big thing from writing, at least, is that when you're branding a person, you need to really make sure that you have that authenticity and that sincerity covered, so that you sound completely like, and you convince everybody that you sound exactly like that person.
Ghostwriting. We're not for it. We're not for it. So I have a compliment here actually from Janice. Great start. Love the platform look. Thank you, Janice. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And then we got Harry
Not
D.
a question, but we'll take it.
We'll take it. Yeah, no, for sure.
Compliments are fine.
We'll take compliments. We'll take, whatever you want to send us. So Harry D, we're talking influence in these days. Unfortunately, one hears this and tends to think influencer. What is Fook's take on the development of this trend? Lazy marketing?
Again, I think there's a place for it if it's authentic. If you're using it purely for influence and you're just doing it because it seems like a good idea and it's going to get you awareness and hits and impressions, I think then it feels like it lacks something. It feels forced and it feels kind of, then it's lazy. I think if you're going to have influencer marketing, you need a brand manual that tells you how to engage influencers. Your influencers need to be on brand. They need to have the same values as your company. They just need to share a lot of things with a brand that seeks to use an influencer. So influencer marketing, if it's just for the sake of getting hits, yes, I think that's lazy. If it's done well, if it's done with integrity and authenticity, and the influencers share the same values as a brand, and it's very carefully considered, I think it can do really great things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Got another question here. Some would say branding and marketing are the bells and whistles. How can I justify spending on it, and what is the return?
Well, I think, the big thing you probably need to really think about is, it's not, do I have a brand or do I not have a brand? Should I have branding or just not take advantage of it? I think, there's a sliding scale, and, you can be up here with lots of influence and, lots of respect and high regard for your brand, or you can be down kind of past the middle where, it's hurting you, you're losing business because of it. So I think, you need to think about how you're managing your brand. If you're looking at it as just bells and whistles when it's specifically about the branding, I think, you might want to rethink about kind of what your definition of brand is, because I think, it can work against you. So I think it's always important to pay attention to it, make sure it's aligned with your values and your goals, so that, you don't have to be Apple, where people are just your disciple and they buy whatever you sell. You can be anywhere on that scale, but, you want it to work for you strategically, the way you need it to work for you. I think having it work against you is just, it's pushing a boulder uphill. That's who wants to be doing that.
It's like what we said earlier. It's like it's there whether you like it or not, your brand, and it's up to you whether you control that perception and define that perception. But I think, it's obviously, we would say this, but it's not bells and whistles for us. It's absolutely integral to the growth of a business. It's a growth driver, branding. If you invest in branding, you're investing in creating something that people build relationships with, and therefore customer loyalty, customer retention, they become that much easier because people are building a relationship with you. They feel like they know you, they feel like they trust you. And you're also, if you invest in branding, you're also saying, I care. If you're investing in your image, you're saying that I care about my image, and people like to see businesses that care about the work that they do. And so then it's easier to get new customers because they see you with credibility and legitimacy and trust and confidence from the very first impression. And I think that's a big thing is you can control that first impression, or you can certainly have a better handle on it. So not only does branding help with your existing customers, but it lets you have a great first impression with someone, because they see you for the first time. They'll make a lot of assumptions about a business, and if you've put your best foot forward, all of those assumptions will be good.
Yeah, someone once told me that do we want to control our environment, or are we going to let our environment control us? And I really think that resonates here really well with branding. We absolutely want to be able to control our environment, and then there's sometimes where we can't, but you can always do something that will leverage your brand afterwards, right?
Yeah,
So I got a question here from Mark. What messaging do you think retailers need to be communicating their customers as we move forward?
we're back to the COVID.
Yeah.
I think the human angle really comes into play here. I think, it's, as much as we said earlier, everyone speaks the same language. I think there's some of that language you have to speak, and I think assuring people, and we keep saying authentically, but authentically, letting people know that they can trust you, using messaging that's very human and very relatable and says, I see you and I get you, I get your problems. I think that's the communication that companies need to have going forward. Very human conversation.
Yeah.
I think another thing, to add on is that think about what your own experience is like. I think often, specifically with COVID, we think, oh, this has never happened before like this. What do I say? It's so complicated. But in fact, you yourself are going through this experience. You want to know how other people feel. How do you feel about it? So often I think we put, kind of customers and marketing and this whole other world way over there, but we realize that we are also customers to someone else. We go through it every day, and we have. So just think about how you feel. Think about how the people around you feel about something. And I think if you pay attention, you'll find the message that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think too, I think it's hard to say what should your message be. That's got to be, you got to really boil that down to who you are to say what your message should be. But I think if you're kind of rethinking what your message currently is, I think you gotta bring it back to what value am I giving out to people right now? Because, especially if it's in a marketing context, if it's in a, marketing material, if you're asking for people to stop and read or look or, spend their time with you, I think it's just important to think, is this message worth their time? Have I done enough to really make sure this message is connecting with the customers I'm looking for? So I think that's probably a good starting point if you're rethinking that. It's hard to say how to say what it should be without specifics, but I think that's definitely where you'd want to begin that quest into, reworking your message.
Yeah. And we have another question actually from David Powell. What brand work have you done that you are proudest of, and which work has delivered the best results for the client? I love this question. I love all the questions. Appreciate them too.
Tia, I reckon
let's give that to Tia.
That's a Tia question.
Yeah, he'd have an opinion.
Well, I would say the Amanda brand, the one that we had shown earlier in this, and for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, we're very pleased with the result, and we do definitely feel like that is a brand that explores the idea of body image in a way that you don't usually see. Even the fact that we avoided using pictures of anybody in general is a big thing. And I think when we had the reception of it was quite positive. And I think the truth is, especially with that one, is that we talked about it beyond just women. Like, yes, her clientele was women oriented, and that's certainly a demographic that I think has a lot more of an intense experience with body image. But I think the success behind that brand was because we actually touched on something deeper, that so often that us as human beings feel self-conscious about what we look like, and that ultimately, again, all body types are accepted and celebrated, and so that would probably be, one of our top there.
Yeah, I think that one resonates with me the most when I'm looking at something that really, like, as we talked about before, combining those three pillars of writing, imagery, and design, like that one really pulls me in. I got one here. Fook is based in Toronto and I'm in Europe right now. How can we work together?
Good news. So's Michael.
I'm in Europe as well, but we do a lot of our work online. So we can really work with anybody, anywhere, as long as they're they're okay with the time change.
Yeah. So essentially, we wanna hear from you. I think that's all the time we have for today. Again, really appreciate the questions that came in, and we appreciate your time. Honestly, like in this environment, really appreciate your time. We really wish that you guys have a great holiday season. Spend some downtime. Do it you love doing best. Most, best, whatever. But please reach out to us if you have any further questions. If you want to provide us feedback on today, whether it was good or bad, either way, we want to know how you experienced today's session. create@fookcommunications.com. You can email us there. You can follow us on Instagram @fookcom. And you can give us a follow or a connection on LinkedIn. Search our names. They're right up there for you. And we'd be happy to connect with you and chat more about this. So, gentlemen, any final words?
Just to repeat what you said there. Thanks.
Happy
Thanks.
holidays.
Yeah.
See us next time on our next episode, eh?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we are going to have an episode 2.
Keep an eye out for
Not
that.
sure. Sorry?
Keep an eye out for that.
Yes, we're going to have an episode 2.
What a Christmas gift that is, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, keep an eye out and you'll get the sequel.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone and take care.